Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Mauryan's podcast. And today, we're going to be talking about a model employee. Well, not really a model employee, but a short film that was made by the Surveillance Studies Center at the Queen's University called A Model Employee. Well, the short film talks about the increasing prevalence of surveillance in our digital society, using the example of Neeta, a character in the short film who is an aspiring DJ who is forced to wear a tracking wristband to keep her job at a local restaurant. Now you have to understand that she worked at a local restaurant and she was forced to wear a tracking wristband. Sounds sketchy already, doesn't it? Well, in today's digital age, the world has become more connected than ever before. We have access to incredible amounts of information and technology that have transformed our lives in countless ways. However, along with these benefits come certain challenges and concerns, one of which is the issue of surveillance. Now, surveillance isn't necessarily good or bad. It depends on the amount of surveillance being held. The scenario described about Neeta, the aspiring DJ, who has to wear a tracking wristband to keep her day job, highlights the impact of surveillance on individuals in our society. Again, considering the fact it was a local restaurant, she still had to wear something that was tracking her life outside of work as well. This raises serious concerns about privacy and the potential for employers to overstep their boundaries. I mean, I wouldn't want to be tracked while I'm not clocked in, right? It's just not right, And the worst part is that Neeta's story is not unique. As we become increasingly reliant on technology and interconnected devices, we're creating more and more data about our lives. The places we go, the food we eat, how much fuel we pumped into our car, stuff like that. And this data is being collected, analyzed, and being used in ways that we might not even be aware of. And this is not happening on a weekly basis. This is not happening on a monthly basis. This is not happening on an annual basis. This is happening every second you're using a smartphone. And while the collection of this data can bring benefits, it also poses significant risks to our privacy, autonomy, and freedom. Ultimately, think about it, We live in a society where technology is rapidly advancing and surveillance has become a pervasive aspect of our lives. You can't just, stop using your smartphones because you're under surveillance. You can't. Smartphones are an essential part of our lives. You want to order food, you need a smartphone. You want to make calls, you need a phone, smartphone. Well, you want to order something from Amazon, you need a phone. It just makes everything easy. It's so hard to give up. And that's okay, because technological advancement is a required and it's an essential part of, human growth as a species. But we're constantly being tracked by our smartphones, computers, and other devices, and the personal information that's being collected is analyzed by various organizations. It's not one central organization. This data is being sold to different organizations, as a marketing tactic. But, surveillance might have some benefits, such as improving security and preventing crime. It also does raise some significant ethical questions about the balance between privacy and security. While surveillance isn't necessarily good or bad, as I mentioned before, it raises some questions about the balance between privacy and security. Let's talk about a couple of social implications that the video can have over the people who consistently use phones and, laptops and everything to better understand the surveillance problem. Okay, so first of all, Neeta's tracking band is a clear example of the risks of surveillance. Let's start off with that. By tracking her every move, the wristband is invading her privacy and limiting her freedom outside of work. You realize how bad that is? Limiting her freedom outside of work just because the employer wants her to perform well so that their business increases. Naturally, Neeta tries to deceive the system by giving the wristband to her sister while she's out partying or DJing. But the new device upgrade means that if she gets caught, it's going to be a severe consequence. As we can see in the video, her sister wears her band. The new update tracks the biometrics, scans that the person's not the person who should be wearing the wristband, automatically calls the police, and her sister gets arrested for it. It's crazy scary, right? That's the first one. Let's talk about the second social implication. The scenario of Neeta also highlights the potential for abuse of surveillance technology. Employers may use tracking devices to exert more control over their employees, which can lead to a toxic work environment and a lack of trust between employers and employees. Furthermore, the data collected by the devices may be used for purposes other than what was originally intended, such as for marketing or even for discriminatory purposes. Regardless of me having mentioned marketing tactic before, it could also be used for discriminatory practices. Let's talk about the third implication, the idea of constantly being monitored. It's just unsettling by nature, right? But we have to understand that it's not just happening in the workplace. Even though Neeta was forced to wear a wristband that tracked her location and tracked her activities, everything, she was already carrying a smartphone, which already does that. A lot of people carry smartphones with them all the time that track our location, our online activity, social media searches, social media likes, YouTube searches. All this is data that can be sold to different companies so that they understand you better. And trust me, this is not out of, the will to understand you as a person. No, they want to understand you as a consumer. What products you like, what products you don't like. This data collection is often done without our knowledge or consent, and the data can be used to manipulate us as well, not just to understand what we do and why we do and how often we do whatever it is we do, but it's also used to manipulate us for far more nefarious purposes. Understanding that the consequences of this surveillance can be significant, we come to a realization that it can limit our freedom of expression, hinder our ability to make decisions, and ultimately impact our mental health. It can also perpetuate systems of oppression and discrimination, as certain groups are targeted or marginalized based on their data. I believe that out of all the three social implications I mentioned before, the idea of being constantly monitored is the one that stands out to me the most, because us as consumers, we want the products because we like them. We don't want to be manipulated into liking other products in a certain way, or, we don't want to be manipulated into buying something that we actually don't want. Because companies are good at marketing. They will make you want something that you actually don't need. And that's just the sheer idea of it blows my mind. It needs to be controlled. So what can we do about this? The first step is to become aware of the data that is being collected about us and to understand how it is being used. We understand the consequences of surveillance can be significant. It can limit our freedom of expression, hinder our ability to make decisions, and impact our mental health ultimately. in order to prevent all of this from happening in the first place, we need to demand more transparency and accountability from those who are collecting our data. And we need to advocate for stronger privacy protections, by whatever service provider we use, whatever companies that we, are consumers of. We need to advocate for stronger privacy protections. But we also need to think about the ways in which we use technology and the impact that it has on our lives. We need to be mindful of the data that we are sharing and the applications that we're using, and we need to consider the long-term implications of our actions.